Lee County. How's everybody doing tonight? Well, first of all, it's a huge honor and a privilege to be here with you guys today. A lot of you already heard that United Airlines is doing everything in their power to keep me from coming here today, and that systemic oppression was the closest I'll ever feel to the Underground Railroad. Now, before I get into my whole story, and thank you again, Mercedes, for having me here to share my story with you all, I do feel it would be remiss of me to not also discuss what just happened last week, where there was yet another assassination attempt on our sitting president. So situations like that, they make me really grateful that we're able to come into rooms like this, where we're able to discuss ideas of how to elevate our country, how to unite our country, to solve the problems in education, to solve the issues with propaganda. But over on the left, I think it's much deeper than them just spreading lies about the Republican Party, than spreading lies about conservatives. It's gotten to the point where they are now trying to make it editorial, even to romanticize when these people are choosing political violence. You look at Cole Allen, the man who just attempted to take the president's life because he cracked a couple jokes in his manifesto. You now have people that are trying to empathize with him. Just last year, you had Luigi Mangione, the guy who shot and killed the United Healthcare CEO, and everybody was trying to be on his side and giving him all of his credit and his flowers simply because he was kind of funny and he was photogenic. It's getting very, very scary how terrible this is getting. And they're trying to say that, oh, it's just resistance. Resistance isn't going and putting a bullet into somebody that you disagree with. Resistance is walking up to someone you disagree with, shaking their hand, saying, I disagree with you, and this is why. Real resistance is running for office, or it's getting people to go to the polls to make the changes happen in our country. There is no place for political violence in this nation, and maturity and honesty is recognizing that the left is not just becoming the party of violence, they always have been, and we need to continue to shut that down. So how do we do that? If I had to put it simply, I would say that miseducation and censorship is how we got into this mess. So real education and real conversations are how we are going to get out of this mess. And if they're not okay with that, and they want to keep having these like African blood tribe wars type of situations when it comes to our politics, they need to take that mess over to Somalia. Because we're not having it. Now with that off of my chest, nice to meet you guys. If you don't know my name or have never seen my face, I am Xaviaer DuRousseau. I am a political media personality. I am with Prager University. They're an educational nonprofit where we talk about exactly what I just mentioned. American, Judeo-Christian values, real education, and just trying to bring some common sense back to this country because it's getting a little too narrow for me here. So in addition to doing my social media content, as you guys saw, I'm frequently on Fox News, and I'm trying to do everything I can to get more people where I live in LA and Beverly Hills to finally be outspoken about the truth, because everybody behind the scenes is so over the woke nonsense that we see today. So I've been a big connector in the LA space. I was very, as far as getting them into the MAGA world, I was a part of the RNC Youth Advisory Council, very proud to help President Trump win over much of Gen Z. And just this last year, I reached about 1 billion views across platforms. I was named by TikTok in the top 30 most impactful influencers in the 2024 election cycle on Beverly Hills 40 Under 40, and the Hollywood Reporter's annual A-list said that I was in the top 45 most powerful creators on the planet. Now, I'm very proud to be able to stand here today and know that I'm on the right side of history, but as you guys may have read already, it has not always been that way. That has not always been the case. So if we're going to go all the way back, yes, I used to be a liberal. I was a BLM activist, and I'm still mortified to this day, and I'm doing everything I can to right those wrongs of what I was doing back at BLM. I wasn't burning down buildings or anything like that. Don't think I was that radical, but I was definitely marching, and it was the most ghetto thing I ever participated in. But to make sense of it, I'm going to go all the way back. So I was born in Southside Chicago, in the trenches of Inglewood, close to O Block. If anybody in here knows who Chief Keef is, I was his neighbor. We were friends as kids. And When I was in that when I was in that area, it's kind of like the show Fresh Prince of Bel-Air but backwards, where my eldest brother got in trouble one time, and next thing I know, our entire family picks up and moves to the middle of nowhere cornfields of central Illinois. A very small redneck town, about 10,000 people, 95% white, called Pontiac. And now, you would think that my family would focus much more on the positives of living in Pontiac. You would think that they would appreciate the fact that the education was better, it was safer. If you left your car unlocked, it wouldn't be stolen within 20 seconds. You know, all these different positives of living in this much more quiet, quaint town. But instead, I was always told by my family that leans very left, I would dare even say Marxist, that everything I did needed to focus on the fact that I was different from the other kids because I was one of the few black people there. I would have people in my family that would constantly tell me that I needed to beware of the blue-eyed, red-headed devils. My family would tell me different rules of when I went to white people's homes, if I was allowed to, that I needed to make sure I never walked in the back door. I always had to walk in the front door, that I could never fully trust a white person. And for me, this was really confusing for me because I moved to Pontiac, a little cornfield, when I was only 2 years old. So most of my friends and the people that were so nice to me were white, but for some reason I was constantly getting told that these people that were nice to me, I wasn't supposed to trust them. Then I would spend every summer back in the trenches in Southside Chicago at my grandmother's house, where it was as ghetto as it possibly could be. And it was like this identity crisis where I would feel too white for the black people and too black for the white people, whatever that means. And for so long I felt the need that I needed to do everything that I could to assert my blackness. You add into that even while living in a more conservative town, the education is still quite low. All the different things that I would be indoctrinated with. And you would think that I would have seen through it eventually, because when it comes to my high school experience, I pretty much did everything right. I had all sorts of friends. I was homecoming every year. I was the first black valedictorian. I was at 15 clubs. I did 2 sports. I literally did it all. And yet still in my brain, I thought that I was oppressed, and I thought that systemic racism was going to always be the biggest obstacle in my life. Because I felt the indoctrination, because I was constantly being told this by teachers and my family, and for sure by social media, I really believed it, even though every aspect of my life was showcasing otherwise. And I think it's even easier now for kids to be indoctrinated when you think about just how these social media platforms are now set up. If you look at TikTok, for example, this is why parents need to be much more attentive with your kids and making sure that they're actually doing things on their phone. If you think about how TikTok works, it kind of works like a casino, where it's like they're just constantly scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and there's sounds, and there's noise, and there's colors, and all this craziness happening. And it's like the second that you look up from your phone, the rest of the world is boring to you, because it's not constantly overstimulating. But what makes it even scarier than a casino is a casino is going to steal your money. TikTok is going to steal your common sense. So we're at this point now where, in my life, I was woke in high school, I went to college, had an academic ride. It wasn't one because I was black, but yet still I felt the need to think that I was oppressed. And of course, went to public university, so I was even more woke. Years go by, I continued to be an online activist. I was a BLM activist long before it was popular and cool and trendy. And let's fast forward to 2020. So, pandemic happens. And there I was, bored. And I had a roommate at the time, and his girlfriend told me as a joke that I should apply to be on this show called The Circle on Netflix. Now, the premise of The Circle, it's kind of like Big Brother, if you know that show. It's like a popularity contest. But The Circle, you don't actually meet your competitors. You're all in separate rooms, and you communicate with each other through what's essentially a social media platform. So some of you are your actual selves, and then some of you are catfish. So if you don't know what a catfish is, it's pretending to be somebody else online. So I applied to be myself. I made the video as a joke. I sent it in. Out of 25,000 people, they thought that I was dramatic and extra enough. They wanted me to be on the show. And around that same time, everything pops off with George Floyd-Palooza. And because of that, they were like, let's not only have you be on there as an activist where you're teaching other people how to become BLM activists, teaching people how to be progressive and woke. Let's have you do it, but from the profile of a woke white sorority girl named Samantha. So my account on the show was going to be a blonde, beautiful white girl, and I was going to teach them how to be woke. And because of the pandemic, we never knew how long this was going to get pushed out. It kept getting pushed out month by month by month. So during that time, I was like, well, I don't want to go on the show and be just some washed-up reality star. If I'm going to be this woke activist, let me take it all the way there. So I decided I was going to make a whole series where I tried to debunk every conservative group, organization, individual, including PragerU, which I now work at, including Charlie Kirk, including, people like Candace Owens and the Crackers. I was going to go and try to debunk all of these different people in a series, and instead, I accidentally dismantled the entire narrative that I had been indoctrinated with. What I quickly realized is that BLM was a scam. I saw behind the curtain, but I was saying to people, why are you going and burning down buildings? Why are you guys pretending to be martyrs or pretending like the police searched you for no reason when you were charging them? I was told that I needed to shut up and stay alive. I'm like, okay, well let me shut up and stay alive. And then I started looking deeper. I started looking at, where's the money going? Why are we paying for things? I ended up realizing Breonna Taylor's mother, one of the most prolific situations in BLM, even her own mother was a whistleblower saying that it was a scam. And yet I still just didn't want to believe it. So then I started looking deeper into the Democratic Party and into these movements and into everything that was going on. And I realized, maybe we can do even more. Maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to have some law and order in this country. Maybe socialism isn't the greatest thing, considering that it never works literally anywhere in the world. And maybe the economy, that should be more of a focus rather than, people's pronouns. So as I started to realize that I was wrong about so many things, I finally got to the point I was like, I can't do this anymore. That's not a reality show. And a few months later, I just texted, and this was now in 2020, so the next month actually, Joe Biden was elected as president, and I am mortified at this point. And I was just so exhausted of feeling like I spent so long thinking that I was a victim, when really I needed to grow up, look in the mirror, and recognize that I am privileged to live in the greatest country on planet Earth. Once I saw through the lies, I really could not unsee it. It was like this domino effect of recognizing just how many things I had been lied to about. And I became sick and disgusted by the fact that they were exploiting the struggle of my ancestors to try to tell me how I need to think and how I need to vote today. Like, okay, yes, my ancestors were enslaved mostly by the Democratic Party, but what does that have to do with me today? Because today I'm a God-fearing Christian man who wants to see our country have law and order. I'm a patriot. That's where my vote stands right now. And I was just sick of allowing my demographic to be weaponized against me. Which is why it makes me so happy to see people like Congressman Byron Donalds running for governor, because he is going to be the first Black Republican governor in the history of this country, and I think it's going to be so important for young people to see. Not to play identity politics, but sometimes you got to play a little identity politics. And, shout out to him and his beautiful wife, Erica, because they are truly pioneers and trailblazers when it comes to not only school choice, but giving empowerment to parents and for children's safety long before it was popular. So I'm so excited to see that he is running. And while I don't yet see myself running for office, even though a lot of people want me to, I have dedicated my life to fighting propaganda and trying to undo all the different lies that I was taught, that I went and taught other people. One of the first things I did as soon as I started speaking out was I had to blow the whistle on BLM. I read and fulfilled every single opportunity that I had the chance, and now that they are in the grave, I will continue to keep my foot on BLM's neck. But you're still seeing organizations to this day getting exposed. Did you guys see what happened with the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, that just got exposed for $3+ million going to groups like the KKK? They're going to the Unite the Right rallies that have people all fighting each other. It's going to the American Nazi Party. And you really know that you don't live in a racist country when you literally have to fund the racism, when you have to fund the division. Because it's always going to be much easier and more profitable to pretend that you're fighting an issue rather than getting out there and actually fighting an issue and making a change in our country. So we have to keep exposing it. We have to keep exposing how fraudulent it is, because they don't want us to know our actual history. They don't want to know how much our country has bent over backwards to right the wrongs of our nation in a way that no other country has ever done. And it's to the point now where so many conservatives and Republicans, I feel like they're afraid to be public about the fact that they have these values and that they have really just common sense. But the thing is I don't think that you should focus so much on the fact that we're on defense. We should be just showcasing who is on offense. The best PR that we can possibly do in the Republican Party is showcasing, let's look at what they're doing over there. I mean, on the left, you have this side that thinks that all it takes to be a woman is putting on a Party City wig and fake breasts, and that makes you a woman. You have this side over here that wants to bring all of the illegal ice collectibles over here so they can wreak havoc in our country. They don't want law and order, they want communism, they want extremism, they don't like women's spaces. They're doing everything in their power to completely disempower our nation. So we need to stop worrying about the fact that we're defending common sense and start showcasing who they are. Because they are dead set on taking away our constitutionally protected, God-given rights. And that's just something that we simply can't stand and let happen. And I think so much of what is terrifying that's happening in the world can be summarized by one face, Zohran Mamdani. You know, the one thing that Kamala Harris ever said that I love is she said that she loves the Venn diagram. I personally love the Venn diagram because you are able to take something like leftism and Islam, two things that should never really have that much crossover considering that they stand for completely different things, but because of their similarities, you have somebody like Zohran Mamdani, this radical Islamist leftist and communist who is dead set on destroying Judeo-Christian values, destroying capitalism, and if we don't start making that crystal clear that we see this connection that's happening, we're going to be doomed. And I love that Congressman Byron Donalds said today that we can't be America only. We can't just be isolationists because we all know that our enemies, they're not by themselves. We see that all these different Iran proxy terror groups are taking over. They're all over Latin America. They're partnering with China. They have a 25-year deal with China for cheap oil so that they can, exchange anti-American, anti-Western civilization secrets so that they can come destroy us. So I think that we need to be dead set on making sure that we have our allies, that we have common sense, that we have proper education in our school system, and that we know what's going on and the next generation does too. So the last thing I want to say tonight, because I know everybody wants to party, is I want to make sure that you guys are really hearing me, and to make sure that you guys are still awake. So when I come to this side of the room, and I am petty, I will call you out by name if I do not see you, participating. When I come over to you guys, I want you to say can. When I point to this middle section, I want you to say be. And when I point to this section, I want you to say done. Because I'm a firm believer that the impossible can be done. And my story is proof that no matter how much indoctrination there is, how many different narratives that they try to lie to youth about, you can still undo it with the right truth, with the right education, and the impossible of that can be done. So many people feel jaded about Gen Z and think that we're the most godless generation on earth. But my youth right here, Adam, he just came up here and was preaching the word. If you look at the stats, Gen Z is actually the generation that is going back to church in record numbers. So for those of you that thought that Satan already won, we just showed that under God, the impossible can be done. And as we do everything in our power to maintain a sense of patriotism throughout all the propaganda, there's more truth out there than lies. The lies might spread faster, but the truth is always going to prevail, and that is because the impossible can be done. Florida, you as a state are exactly who you think you are, and you need to keep electing the right people. That includes my good friend Byron Donalds. And I know that when you bring a challenge to him, he is going to say that the impossible